Automakers are having trouble selling cars. Like, seriously. It felt as though the day was never going to come, and if you listen to dealerships or automakers, you may have been convinced that this day still wasn't here. You may have been convinced that cars were flying off dealership lots, that dealerships are still charging above MSRP, and that if you want a discount on your new vehicle purchase, you're an absolute moron. That's what dealerships would like for you to believe, but the truth is, you've been lied to. We all have. Because despite what automakers and dealerships want you to believe, they are in fact having trouble selling cars, at least compared to 2021 and 2022 levels where the car market was absolutely hot. You see, Cox Automotive releases inventory data every single month, and they've been doing this for years. In fact, according to Cox Automotive, in February of this year, vehicle inventory data was at 76 days supply. This is a whopping 52% above what we saw this exact same time last year. And it's only 1 day lower than what we saw in February of 2019, so our last normal year prior to the pandemic. This year was 76 days of inventory. In 2019, it was 77 days. There is currently 2.46 million vehicles in total inventory with an average listing price of $47,285. Now, there are kind of two sides to this coin. Now, the amount of inventory that we see today is pretty much identical to the inventory levels that we saw 5 years ago in 2018. So with this in mind, you would think that dealership incentives should also be equal to 2019 levels. But I don't think I surprise anyone whenever I say that they're not equal. In fact, they're quite a ways off. According to Kelley Blue Book data, dealership incentives are absolutely up from a year ago, that's for sure. But they are still quite a bit down from 2019 levels when inventory was the same. Dealership incentives are measured by percentage of average transaction price. So how much of an incentive did these dealerships give based off of the transaction price of that vehicle? So if, for example, a vehicle was $10,000 and the dealership gave a $1,000 incentive, that would be an incentive of 10%. In 2019, this incentive percentage was between 10 and 11%. So on a $36,590 car, which was the average new vehicle transaction price in Q1 of 2019, you would get a discount of anywhere between $3,600 and $4,000. Today, the average incentive is 5.9%. So on a $47,244 car, you may get a discount of $2,800. So not only is the average transaction price for a vehicle more expensive today than in 2019, but the percentage of incentives is also lower, and the dollar amount that dealerships are paying based on that percentage is also lower today than it was in 2019, despite the fact that inventory levels are basically identical and cars are more expensive. So theoretically, even if the percentage was lower, you would think that the amount that you're getting in incentives in actual dollar amount would at least be a little bit more equal, but it's not. The average transaction price in a car today is $47,244. That's $10,654 more than the average 2019 vehicle price. And yet the discount that you're getting with dealership incentives is $1,000 less than what we're getting in 2019. And so if the car market wasn't as lopsided as it is today, sure, you would still be paying more for the vehicle that you're buying because the average transaction price for cars has gone up so much. But at the same time, based off of historical incentives that dealerships have offered, we should be at that 10% incentive mark, which means that you should get a pretty steep discount on cars, and we're just not seeing that. And you know what? I think to a degree, the incentive issue that we're currently seeing in the car market and the lack of incentives comes down to an educational issue. I think people who are involved in the car market and don't buy cars often, they don't really realize that dealerships are lying whenever they say that buying and paying above MSRP is pretty normal in this current market. And so when they're told this by a dealership, they take what they say at face value. But I think in order to really turn the car market around and start increasing these incentives back to 2019 levels, we need to have more and more people pushing back on these above MSRP prices and these BS dealership packages. The more people that push for an incentive and for a discount, I think the more often that'll happen. It'll end up bringing this percentage of incentives up. So if a dealership tells you that paying above MSRP is normal today in 2024, make sure to tell them that they're full of crap. Because believe it or not, dealerships are still doing this every single day. In fact, there is an entire website dedicated to this called markups.org, where they keep track of what dealerships are charging markups today in 2024. But despite improving inventory levels across the car market as a whole, not all automakers are created equal. And some automakers, believe it or not, are still struggling to meet demand. Earlier, I mentioned that the average amount of inventory in the US is 76 days. And while there are many automakers that are well above that 76-day supply of inventory, there are a few automakers that are really struggling to even meet that. For example, despite growing inventory levels, Toyota is still at 34-day supply, less than half of the industry average. Followed by Honda with 48-day supply, Lexus with a 50-day supply, going up all the way to BMW, which has a higher but still below average supply of 76 days. These are vehicle makes that, while I don't think they should be charging above MSRP, if there was an automaker to charge above MSRP, it probably would be these manufacturers. But the real struggle of these automakers can really be shown in how inventory has changed over the last year. Because, for example, in 2023, the average day supply across the car market as a whole was 57 days. So between 2023 and today, the total market inventory grew by 19 days in just under a year. But in the same period of time, Toyota only grew by a handful. They were at 28 days worth of inventory this time last year, and today they're at 34 days. So Toyota is growing their inventory at a much slower pace compared to the industry average. But Toyota and these other auto manufacturers that I mentioned are sort of the exception here, because there are quite a lot of other automakers that are producing well above the average. For example, Lincoln, which has 133 days worth of supply, followed by Genesis with 132 days, Volvo with 126 days, and Infiniti with 120 days. You can also see Ford, Audi, Volkswagen, Mazda, and Nissan hovering around 100 days. So these automakers specifically really under no circumstances should be charging above MSRP. They shouldn't be charging BS dealership packages, and they should be giving incentives. And while many of these auto manufacturers are not giving incentives, and they are still trying to charge above MSRP, I've got to give credit where credit is due. Because while many dealerships are still trying to be shady, there are a few that are beginning to heavily discount their cars based on their true inventory. For example, Lincoln, which has the highest inventory currently in the car market, a bit less than twice the average amount. And while Lincoln's 2024 vehicles are seeing a lousy discount of only about 2%, which I'm sure you could probably get more off on if you visited the dealership in person, new 2023 models are being discounted online closer to that 10% mark. Again, I'm sure you could discount it even more if you went to the dealership. And again, I gotta give credit where credit is due, because Lincoln is one of the few dealerships that I've looked at over the last year that actually is not only giving discounts, but it's also being transparent about their pricing as well, which is a really refreshing take in this current car market where dealerships are really shady about their pricing. And the great thing is that while many automakers are still charging ridiculous markups, Lincoln isn't the only dealership that is giving discounts and is being transparent with their pricing. For example, there is this GMC and Buick dealership that is not only being transparent with their vehicle pricing, but they also are giving pretty steep discounts, anywhere between $11,000 all the way up to $15,000. And if you look at markups.org, which is a resource letting you know of what dealerships are marking up cars, you'll find that more and more dealerships are offering no markup at all. And while they are still the minority, we are still making progress. And that's something I appreciate. The point I'm trying to make is that dealership inventory is climbing, which is a good thing. But dealership incentives are not climbing at the same rate, which isn't good. And so if you are somebody who's looking to buy a new car, even a used one, I highly encourage you to look at dealership inventory, because depending on what type of inventory that manufacturer has, it really should dictate what type of incentive or discount that you get. Because if you're buying one of these cars, there is absolutely no scenario where you should be paying above MSRP, and truthfully, you should be getting a discount. But like always, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, if you have anything to add, I would love to hear it, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And while you guys are at it, make sure to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next video.